Hi, it's Kirby Summers. Today is Monday, February the 3rd. Can you believe that? February the 3rd. So we're already well into the new year. Today I want to discuss something that's a little obscure. However, a strange unalivement which is connected to the TV sitcom Cheers. Now, many of you may remember Cheers. It was very popular sitcom that aired on NBC from September 30th, 1982 for, over a decade. It went on through May 20th, 1993 for 11 seasons. There were 275 episodes, and members of the cast included Shelley Long, Ted Danson, Rhea Perlman, uh, George Wendt, Kelsey Grammer, Woody Harrelson. Now, there was an unalivement that was a pretty well known at the time of a teacher, and I will be explaining who that was. Um, and however, there was across the street from where this teacher lived on the Upper West Side, there was a bar, and that bar was full of very suspicious, let's call them characters for the time being, who would later on become famous and who are, in some cases, related to, let's call them spies, because you can't call them anything else, and professional, let's just say hitmen, for lack of a better term. So before I get started, I want to thank those of you who take the time to like the podcast because it helps the algorithm on my platform. And if you have not become a subscriber, just take a moment to do so. And this way you can kind of, I guess, get an alert when I upload new material. And so there was this bar uh, on the Upper West Side on 72nd Street between Broadway and West End Avenue that was called, um, let's see, I mean, I have tons of notes here, but it was sort of called Tweeds. It was like it was named after a very corrupt politician. Um, And I guess you guys might remember him if you've done your history and your required reading, because some of it is true, Boss Tweed. Now, his full name was William uh, Mager Boss Tweed, who was born April 3rd, 1823, and who basically his last day on earth was April 12th, 1878. He was an American politician and most notable for being, quote, the political boss of Tammany Hall. And Tammany Hall, and by the way, I want to just say that I am apolitical. I am neither a proponent of any political party. I don't like the political machine. I only discuss it as it pertains to the information that I want to shed light on regarding something of historical importance that I believe all of you should know. So, at the height of Tweed's influence, he had become the third largest landowner in New York City. And of course, because of that, he became one of the greatest influencers of his generation regarding the elected officials. And so there was a bar on the Upper West Side, as I said, between Broadway and West End Avenue. It was a tiny little bar that had really interesting people. It was named WM Tweets. Now, nobody would have known that it was named for this corrupt politician, except that I do my homework and I live on the Upper West Side and I am interested in the things that happen historically, not just in my city, but everywhere, clearly. However, back in 1973, there was a very shocking unalivement, and the newspapers at the time basically ran the headline, Teacher Found Nude and Slain, Stabbed in West Side Apartment. And then they showed a photograph of a studio apartment, completely trashed, where they found her body. Uh, the newspaper goes on to say New Jersey executive's daughter taught handicapped children, and the school teacher's name is Roseanne Quinn. Now, that name may be familiar to you because her unalivement inspired Judith Rosner's best-selling 1975 novel titled Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which was turned into a film of the same name, which featured Diane Keaton and Richard Gere. Now, in the film, Richard Gere plays a small role. This was in the beginning of his acting career. So the apartment building where Quinn lived and was unalived has a lot of turnover. It was located across the street from the bar, again on 72nd Street. Renters in New York City are transient. They move in and out for a variety of reasons. You know, they are job relocated or they can't afford the rents that continue to go up. The building, again, like a lot of buildings in New York City, people claim that there's haunting, but you know, whether it is or not, I can't tell because I haven't lived there. However, what's interesting about renting in some states is that in some states there's a requirement by law to tell future renters and or people who are buying apartments whether or not an unalivement has happened in that particular space. New York has a law where it is not required to tell about an unalivement. I personally would want to know, I'm sure you do too, if where you're moving into or where you are buying, something tragic has happened. So in this case, nobody has ever been told when they rent this apartment where she met a very tragic end, and which again formed the basis for the film Looking for Mr. Goodbar. So I did a deep dive, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and discovered that, you know, she would attend the bar very regularly, that she would go in by herself. And at the time in 1973, 1972, during that time period, it was not, let's say, customary for single women to go to bars alone. Typically, when women went to bars, they went in groups. Even to present day, women tend to go to clubs and bars in groups. However, she would go on her own. She would take a book. She would read it. She would sometimes talk to a man, and sometimes she would take one back to her apartment. You know, she was one of these newly liberated, let's say, women who was having an affair with one of her teachers, co-workers, and although he was married, this did not seem to be an impediment. But however, there were a lot of interesting people working at this bar who, again, are somehow connected to the very popular TV sitcom we know as Cheers. So, co-creator of Cheers is a man by the name of James Burrows, and he too was a regular. And here's the thing about Burrows that I found interesting. Burrows lived in the Village, meaning downtown, several miles away from the Upper West Side. And frankly, the Village had more, let's say, bars that one could hang out at that were perhaps more interesting than this little dive that almost nobody knew about except for the locals. However, he would make it his point to trek over to the Upper West Side, and he was given a nickname. Now, in this bar, and that's probably where he got the idea, everyone had a nickname, and his nickname at the bar was Uncle Gig. Now, around the days of filming Footloose, which is a film 1984 with the actor Kevin Bacon, who worked at the bar. He waited tables there. Uh, he was nicknamed the Chip. Now, Kevin Bacon, if you are unfamiliar, his father is Edmund Bacon. And Edmund Bacon is known as the father of modern Philadelphia. So we have again Kevin Bacon, and as I have mentioned on other podcasts, there is a bloodline connection, a bloodline thing regarding people who are made famous. And Kevin Bacon is one of these people. Now, Bacon was given the nickname by Burroughs and other patrons for his role in the 1978 movie Animal House. Now, by the way, Animal House was produced by my abuser's best friend, John Landis, who also directed Michael Jackson's music videos, including his 1983 that nobody forgets Thriller, which again has a lot of overtones of the Satanic aspects, right? You have Thriller. And so the name of the bar, after the gruesome unalivement of this woman, was changed to the Allstate Cafe, although everybody continued to just call it Allstate. It finally shut down in 2008. Now let's talk about Quinn. She taught deaf children, she knew how to lip read, and she often eavesdropped on conversations people were having on the other side of the room. Some people have speculated that Quinn herself was an asset of the intelligence apparatus. After all, she had this unique ability to read lips, which is something that intelligence assets have, and they're taught to do this. Now, when she wasn't busy reading a book or talking to a man, she would, quote, listen in, right, to other patrons by reading their lips. So on New Year's Eve, at the age of 28, she met a man by the name of John Wayne Wilson, who was 23 at the bar. Now, after midnight, and now we're talking New Year's Eve, which is again considered a, let's call it a high holy day for those who believe in Satan. It's one of those days like Halloween and other days where unusual things happen to people. So she meets this guy, and after midnight at around 2 o'clock, so officially New Year's Day, she takes him back to her apartment. It's just across the street. Now, here's the interesting thing. This guy, although he was he had an interesting, let's just say that he had an interesting background himself. He had a male lover. He had already left his wife and kids because he had hooked up with his male lover a year earlier. Now, when he was with Quinn, allegedly, she made a comment because he could not, let's just say, the word perform, and she made a comment, suppose, just a joke. And apparently that set him off, allegedly, this is what's described, into a blinding rage, whereupon he proceeded to stab her 18 times. Afterwards, he did some really unusual things, which are gruesome and which have been, let's say, repeated by others in what can best be described as rituals. He then inserted a candle into her. He trashed her place. He smeared blood on the walls. And then he calmly took a shower, got dressed, and left. And of course, if this doesn't remind you of Arliss Perry, who was unalived at Stanford Memorial Church, located on the campus of Stanford University, I don't know what else would, that candle and that, I mean, that just seems really like almost like he too may have been part of a secret um occult or club, one of these things that, like, how does it occur to somebody to do that? So unless you have some pre-knowledge about this. So, Arliss Perry met a horrific fate on October 12th, 1974. And again, it's sort of like her body, it's under, I understand that originally this happened on, like, a church has an altar. And it's my understanding that originally her body was found, and I know I'm digressing, but I'll get back to the Cheers connection to the Good Bar unalivement in a second, that the police and the members of the church did not want people to be afraid of going to church. And so that what happened before, let's say, photographs were taken, so on and so forth, was that they then rearranged her body. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that is what they have said. Now, the Cheers bartender, Woody, was played like in the Cheers TV show, his name was Woody Boyd, and he was played by Woody Harrelson. Now, Woody Harrelson also appeared in the film Natural Born Killers, 1994. And if you look at the posters for Natural Born Killers, it's an Oliver Stone film. It's pretty disturbing. Now, Oliver Stone, that film was co-produced by Arnon Milchan, who we now know is a Mossad spy, was a Mossad spy. His whole film thing was a cover. This was released to the public some years ago. We also know that Harrelson's father is the assassin, Charles Harrelson. Now, something interesting happened some time ago. In April of 2023, Matthew McConaughey claimed that he and Woody Harrelson, who had been longtime friends, could be half-brothers. He implied that Charles Harrelson could also be his father. And according to Mahogany, I mean, he claimed that his father would, meaning this, like he was an intelligence, unaliver, I don't know what term to use that, had known his mother, and that they were thinking about taking a DNA test to see if, in fact, Charles Harrelson was indeed their biological father, making them half brothers. Now, Charles unalived Judge John H. Wood Jr., who was appointed by Richard Nixon on May 29th. Now, Wood was the first U.S. judge assassinated in the 20th century. Now, Harrelson, who again is self-described hitman, was also rumored to have been one of the three tramps who were mysteriously arrested and then let go on November 22nd, 1963, after the unalivement of John F. Kennedy. And, that continues to be debated to present day. However, in September of 1980, Harrelson surrendered to the police after a 6-hour standoff. And during the standoff, he threatened to unalive himself, and he basically made the statement that he was indeed the person who had eliminated Judge Wood and President John F. Kennedy. And then later, during Harrelson's trial, a man by the name of Joseph Chagra testified that Harrelson did claim to have been the person who shot Kennedy, and drew maps showing where he was hiding during this, what is now believed to have been a conspiracy involving CIA and others who collaborated to have him eliminated. And then, according to Jim Marr's 1989 book, Crossfire, Some theorists believe Harrelson is the youngest and the tallest of the three tramps who were arrested again shortly before, and I'm sorry, shortly after the unalivement of Kennedy in Dallas. And this author, Mars, stated that Harrelson was indeed involved with criminals connected to the intelligence agencies and the military. And moreover, he connected Harrelson to Jack Ruby through a man by the name of Russell Douglas Matthews, a third person with links to organized crime who was known to both Harrelson and to Ruby. And then Lois Gibson, who is a forensic artist, she did sort of like do some comparison with the photographs of Harrelson to the photographs of the youngest of the three tramps. And again, they came up believing that he was indeed at the scene. And so, I'm just looking through the photos myself right here. And another person who worked at the bar, to get back to this strange bar, which I believe is a cutout. Now, I have described the cutout as being an intermediary, a trusted intermediary. It could be a person, it could be a school, it could be a corporation, it could be anything. It could be, and in this case, it could be a bar, right? There are a lot of cutouts, frankly, all over that you would not suspect as being connected to intelligence. But I believe this bar was, in fact, very deeply connected to intelligence. So the writer, Tony Hiss, who is the son of Alger Hiss, accused in 1948 of being a Soviet spy, convicted of perjury, he bartended at the bar, by the way, without pay. He just wanted to be there to get to know the people. So again, all the regulars had nicknames like the Chip and Uncle Gig. And then there was a guy named Glenn, so-called nicknamed the Inspector Johnson of the NYPD. So then we have members of the police department, which by now should surprise no one that members of the police department, who, by the way, are trained by CIA specialists. I don't know if you're aware of this, but each police department, they're all trained by CIA. And then there was another guy named Michael Roberts, who was given the nickname Shorthands, who was an attorney. And then the owner, Steven, Resnick. And Resnick, by the way, is the name of a very large property owner. Let's call him a landlord in New York City. And then there were bartenders Bill, nicknamed Junior, Cherry, and John, quote, the Shark Lafayette. And again, where everyone knows your name. So this appears to have been the inspiration for the TV sitcom Cheers. Now, what happened to the person who unalived Quinn? He was arrested on January 11th, just shy of 2 weeks after what happened in her apartment, and he was sent to the Tombs in Lower Manhattan. Now, in May of 1973, a guard suggested that he unalive himself. And then with this suggestion, so it makes you wonder, it is said by mainstream that he pushed bed sheets through the iron rails of his cell door. And then on May 5th, he was found unresponsive on the floor with these very same sheets tied around his neck, and his unalivement was, well, I guess you know where I'm going. It was declared a self-unalivement. So the SUICID word that we hear time and time again. I would be very curious to hear your thoughts on this interesting story. It's very interesting to me. I'm fascinated with this case. Every time I look at it, I find something new. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to give this a like and subscribe. Okay, guys, bye.